Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with me. Today we're going,
Me.
with you. We're going to be talking about Democracy in America
Oh, yeah.
by Alexis de Tocqueville,
Yes, we are.
which is a
Fascinating.
really interesting book, and it's kind of amazing
It is.
that somebody who wasn't even American, he was French,
French aristocrat.
came over here and almost 200 years ago wrote
Yeah,
this book that people are still talking about today.
exactly. And what's really fascinating about it is that, he didn't just like pop over, do a quick tour and write a pamphlet.
Yeah,
He spent 9 months
9 months.
traveling across America.
Wow. That's longer than a lot of people spend on vacation
It is.
these days, but I guess he didn't have Netflix.
Back then. So what really struck him and what really forms, I guess, the bedrock of democracy in America is this idea of the equality of conditions.
Okay.
He saw how deeply ingrained that sense of equality was in America and how it shaped everything.
So not just the laws on the books,
Not just the law,
but like how people interacted with each other,
exactly how they interacted,
their religious practices.
their religious practices, how they viewed the world.
This is something I actually never really thought
Yeah,
about before. That's really interesting.
it is crucial, and it's a crucial insight. And from there, Tocqueville goes on to explore the implications of this equality. And he saw how it could fuel both the incredible dynamism of American democracy, but also its potential vulnerabilities.
Okay. So it's like a double-edged sword,
Kind of,
a
yeah.
two-sided coin, however you want
However
to
you want it.
put it. And this leads into one of his most famous and I think kind of unsettling
Right.
observations, which is the tyranny of the majority.
Right. And that can be a little bit
It's kind of scary
frightening.
when you
Yeah.
think about it, because
Especially today.
it's like we all believe the majority rules.
Right.
That's how democracy works. But then there's this,
There's this dark side to it.
this shadow lurking over it.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And, Tocqueville recognized that in a democracy where the majority's will prevails, there's a constant danger of suppressing the rights and freedoms of those who don't fit the mold.
So give me an example of that.
Well, imagine like a community voting to ban a certain type of music just because it's not to the majority's taste.
Okay.
So that's the majority kind of flexing its power in a way that infringes on individual liberties.
Wow. That's a really good example and kind of scary because
Yes.
I immediately thought of like book banning
Right.
and things that are
Absolutely.
happening today. So
Oh, yeah,
it's,
he saw that as a real risk,
yeah.
a real tension.
Yeah. It's almost like, how do you balance the will of the people with the rights of the individual?
That's the question that he's wrestling with.
Yeah. And it seems like a
Yeah.
really tough question to answer.
Very tough. And to this day, we're still grappling with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've got this idea of the equality of conditions, and we've got this potential dark side of majority rule.
Right.
What else did Tocqueville see as being like crucial?
To making
To making American democracy.
Yeah, to making American democracy work. So he was really, really impressed by what he called civil associations.
Okay, so what are those?
Think of it as like the building blocks of a vibrant civic life.
Okay.
So community groups,
Okay.
clubs, volunteer organizations,
Yeah.
all these spaces where people come together
Yeah.
to address common concerns.
So it's not just about voting every few years.
Not just about
It's about actually
being active,
participating,
being a part of your community.
shaping your community. And, this is so relevant today.
It is.
Because even with, all of our online activism and social media,
Yeah.
Tocqueville saw these civil associations
Yeah.
as a powerful counterbalance to the power of the state.
Okay.
So they provide a space for individuals to voice their opinions,
Yeah.
to participate in public life,
Yeah.
and hold their leaders accountable.
And all outside the formal structures of government.
That's really interesting.
It is
It's almost like they're the safety valve
the safety valve
of a democracy.
of a democracy.
Letting off steam,
Letting off steam.
keeping things from getting too...
Too heated or too centralized.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
That's a really
A good way to
good way to put it.
yeah.
So, but even though Tocqueville was really impressed by the energy
Right.
he saw in America,
He did.
he also noticed
He also saw this.
a potential pitfall,
Yeah, a potential pitfall.
which was the relentless pursuit of,
material wealth and comfort.
and this is where we get to like that stereotype of like Americans and their
Oh,
stuff.
I know, right?
Right.
Like he must have been like, what is going on?
Yeah, coming from his background.
I know.
That must have been kind of
a little shocking.
shocking, yeah.
Yeah.
But it wasn't so much that he was,
Judging it.
yeah,
but he was trying to understand
Yeah, what are
the long-term
Yeah.
consequences of this.
Okay.
And so he observed that this focus on material well-being, while it was contributing to, the dynamism of American society, it could also lead to a decline in civic engagement.
So if everybody's just busy like trying to get the next
Big thing, the
Yeah.
next iPhone,
Yeah, who's going to worry about,
who's going to mine the story,
Yeah, who's
they say.
who's
Yeah.
looking after the big picture?
A bigger picture, exactly.
So it's almost like he's saying, "Hey, you guys are doing great
Yeah.
with all this material prosperity.
Right.
But don't forget about the things
Right. Don't lose sight
that really matter."
of the things that really matter.
Yeah.
Your civic duty,
Yeah.
holding your leaders accountable,
Yeah.
participating,
Yeah.
all of that.
So he's identifying this tension between individual prosperity
Right.
and the collective good.
Yes.
Almost like, if we're so busy building our own
Little empire.
little empires,
Yeah.
our own little
We're not going to worry about,
the
the big garden of
the garden of our democracy.
Yeah. And this leads us into something else that Tocqueville
Yes.
was looking at, which was the role of religion
In America,
in American democracy.
which may seem a little counterintuitive.
It does, especially for someone coming from Europe, where
yeah.
church and state were.
Yeah, they were pretty much one and the same.
Yeah, so this is really interesting.
Yeah.
We're going to...
So we'll dive into that in part 2.
Yes, we'll dive into that in part 2.
Okay.
Looking at what he had to say about religion in America.
Very interesting stuff.
Yes, very interesting stuff. Okay, so we're talking about religion in America, and this is where it gets a little
surprising.
Yeah, because when you think of somebody like Tocqueville coming from Europe,
Yeah.
you would think that he'd be kind of against religion.
You'd think he'd be very suspicious of it.
Yeah,
But he wasn't.
he wasn't.
No.
Yeah.
He actually saw it as something quite positive. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so what he observed was that in America, obviously you had this separation of church and state,
Right.
but religion still played a significant role in shaping people's morals and behaviors.
So it wasn't about imposing a specific religious doctrine.
Yeah.
It was more about the ethical framework.
It was more about the values, the
Yeah.
underlying values.
Yeah.
And, he saw religion as kind of this social glue that was binding people together around this common set of principles.
Okay.
And remember, this was a time when individualism and the pursuit of wealth were on the rise. And he thought that religion could help to temper those potentially destabilizing forces.
So almost like a counterweight to the potential excesses of
Yes.
individual liberty and material ambition.
Yeah,
It's interesting how he was able to connect those dots.
it is fascinating.
Yeah.
And this kind of brings us back to that core tension that Tocqueville identified
Right.
between freedom and equality.
Yes.
And a healthy democracy needs to find a way to balance those two.
It's like you need both wheels on a bicycle
Exactly.
if you want to go anywhere.
You're going to fall over
Yeah. You need to.
if you focus too much on one or the other.
Yeah. So it's finding that balance.
Finding that balance. And he recognized that, striving for absolute equality could potentially stifle individual liberty.
Yeah.
And conversely, unrestrained individual freedom could lead to inequality and social division.
Right.
So it's this really tricky balancing act.
Yeah.
And he didn't offer any easy solutions.
Yeah. He's not giving us a how-to manual.
No,
Yeah.
he's just kind of laying out the challenge and
Yeah.
saying this is something that we need to think about.
All right. So no easy answers,
No easy answers.
but he is identifying some.
He's identifying
really-
read my import.
The key questions.
Yeah.
The key questions
Yeah.
that we need to.
That we still grapple with today.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of things we still grapple with today, let's talk about his observations about the media.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is long before the internet.
This is long before
Social media.
Twitter and Facebook.
Right. But he already saw
He saw
the power of the media.
the potential
So
for
what
the
are we saying?
media to have an outsized influence on public opinion.
So even back then, newspapers were,
They were shaping the narrative.
they were very important.
Absolutely.
But it's nothing like compared to 24/7 news cycle
the 24/7
that we have now
It's
on
content.
social media.
Yeah, with the echo chambers and everything.
Yeah, and the algorithms feeding us what they think we want to see. It's almost like designed to
Yeah.
keep us outraged.
Keep us engaged, but in a way that's not necessarily healthy.
Yeah, so what do you think Tocqueville would make of all of this?
He would be horrified,
Yeah.
but I think
Maybe a little fascinated too?
fascinated in a horrified kind of way.
Yeah.
But you know what he was really concerned about was how the media could be used to manipulate public opinion,
Right.
to distract people from important issues.
Mm.
Yeah.
and even to incite violence.
Right.
And he also worried about the tendency of the media to simplify complex issues.
Yeah, and just cater to the lowest common denominator.
Exactly. And, we see that all the time.
Oh, yeah. Clickbait headlines.
Clickbait headlines.
Yeah, just trying to get people
Yeah, to get those clear.
riled up.
Yeah, to get people riled up.
And so I think what he's saying is it's not enough to just have freedom of the press.
Right.
It's also about the quality.
The quality of the information.
Yeah.
And the intention behind it.
Right. And how
People can be swayed.
Yeah.
Especially when they're bombarded with so many messages.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the big challenges of our time.
Yeah.
Is how do you
sift through all the noise and find the signal?
Yeah. How do you know
what's real?
What to believe?
What's true?
Yeah. And I think that's something
Tocqueville would have a lot to say about that.
I think he would.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk more about that in part 3.
In part 3, when we look at the lasting legacy of democracy in America.
Of Tocqueville.
Yes. Okay, so we spent a lot of time with Tocqueville.
We have.
Now, let's talk about what it all means. Like, how do his observations from almost 200 years ago apply to us?
Today,
yeah.
Well, it's really remarkable, I think, how relevant his observations are, even in a world that's vastly different from the one that he witnessed back in the 1830s.
Yeah, it's like he was able to see beyond, like, the specific circumstances of his time.
Yeah.
And identify these kind of, like, fundamental challenges.
A fundamental democracy.
Yeah, tensions that democracies
Yes, exactly.
And I think one of his most enduring warnings is this idea about the dangers of complacency.
Right.
Like, you can't just set up a democracy.
Set it and forget it.
Yeah, and then expect it to run.
Yeah, it requires work.
On autopilot, it's like
constant vigilance.
Constant participation. Yeah, you got to
tend to it.
You've got to
weed it.
You got to water it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does that look like in practice? Like, how can we be less complacent?
Well, I think Tocqueville would say that a healthy democracy requires citizens who are informed about the issues.
Okay, so you got to do your homework.
You got to
pay attention.
You got to read.
Yeah.
You got to listen.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to engage in thoughtful debate.
So not just like scrolling through social media and getting...
Yeah, not just reacting to the headlines.
Yeah, outrage bias.
But actually trying to understand...
Yeah, what are the...
nuances, the different perspectives.
And then I think he would also say that it's not enough to just be informed.
Right. You have to be engaged. You have to actually do something. Yeah, participate.
Yeah.
So, vote, of course.
Yeah.
But also get involved in your community. And I think that's where those civil associations
exactly he talks
about come in.
Civil associations.
Yeah.
That he was so impressed by.
Yeah, like those community groups.
Yeah, community groups.
Clubs. Volunteer organizations.
Volunteer organizations. Those are the spaces where we can actually practice
democracy.
On a small scale.
Yeah.
We can learn to work together.
Yeah.
To compromise, to build consensus.
Yeah, to actually make a difference in our communities.
Exactly.
Like those are the gyms where we exercise our civic muscles.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and I think
great analogy.
Tocqueville saw those as being essential.
Absolutely.
To preventing that kind of like
apathy.
Yeah, just like tuning out. Checking out. And just letting other people becoming decisions for you.
Passive, yeah.
So we've got to be informed.
You got to be informed.
You've got to be engaged.
And
I think the third thing
is we have to be vigilant.
Yeah.
Because Tocqueville was really concerned about
the tyranny
of the majority.
Yeah.
Which we talked about.
And I think that's something...
And it's still relevant today.
It is relevant today.
Yeah.
And those civil associations can help with that.
They can provide a space for minority viewpoints to be heard.
And for people to come together.
Exactly.
And actually like...
work through their differences.
Yeah, hash things out.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the whole issue of the media. Which we talked about.
Which I think Tocqueville would have a field day with.
Oh, he would.
If he were alive today.
Yeah, just the way
I know
we consume information now.
The 24/7 news cycle.
Yeah.
Social media algorithms.
Mind-boggling.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It is.
And I think he would just urge us to be really careful.
Yeah, to be discerning.
To be critical. To not just accept everything. Believe everything you read.
Yeah.
And to really think for ourselves.
To think for ourselves.
Yeah.
And to be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Yeah.
to seek out different perspectives.
So it's not about tuning out.
Yeah.
It's not about becoming cynical.
It's about being engaged.
It's about being...
But in a mindful way.
Yeah, in a mindful way.
Yeah.
In a critical way.
Yeah.
So Tocqueville's giving us a lot to think about.
A lot to think about.
And I think one of the big takeaways for me is that democracy
It's hard work.
is hard work.
It is.
It's not.
It's not a spectator sport.
Yeah, you can't
Sit back and expect it to.
and let it happen.
Yeah, pig.
You have to be a participant.
Yeah.
You have to be involved.
You have to get your hands dirty.
You got to
You have to argue with people.
engage in those difficult conversations. Yeah, compromise.
Yeah.
You know, all of that.
And it's messy.
It's messy and it's frustrating.
It is. But I think
But it's the best system we have.
it's the best system we have.
Yeah.
So thank you, Tocqueville,
Thank you, Tocqueville,
for giving us this amazing
for this roadmap.
roadmap. Yeah.
Yeah.
For navigating
The complexities of democracy.
the complexities of democracy.
Yeah. And thank you all for joining us
Yes. Thank you for listening to our deep dive.
on Democracy in America.
Until next time, keep exploring
Keep questioning.
and keep the conversation going.